Welcome everyone again to another episode of the ideaXme show, that profiles the humans behind the big ideas that are shaping our world, inspiring the future and future creators, and for all those that like really great stories. I'm Ira Pastor, your life sciences ambassador along for the journey today. So a set of tools that we've been hearing quite a bit about, and we've discussed a little bit on the show in recent years, is the triad of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, and their respective applications, and primarily in the drug discovery and development process, in terms of how university labs or startups are using some of these tools for instance, better guide the rational drug design process, or more appropriately select patients for a clinical trial, a la personalized medicine. Today, we are going to go to the far end of the spectrum, to a view of the potential of these tools at scale. Ultimately, when they need to be deployed across the mega enterprises responsible for delivering the quality, next generation healthcare to millions, not billions of customers. We're honored today to be joined by Tom Lawry. Tom is the National Director for Artificial Intelligence, Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft. In this role, Tom serves as a strategic advisor to providers, payers, and life science organizations across the Americas, creating enterprise-wide AI initiatives designed to transform healthcare at scale. He focuses on technological, process, and cultural redesign, leading to the creation of intelligent health systems that ultimately can better empower patients, consumers, and clinicians. Tom has also served as the Director of Worldwide Health for Microsoft, where he worked with a similar portfolio of organizations in planning and implementing a variety of innovative analytical solutions to improve quality and efficiency of healthcare services. Tom focuses on strategies for digital transformation, applied to performance optimization, including AI, machine learning, and also natural language processing. He previously served as Director of Organizational Performance for Microsoft's Health Incubator, known as the Health Solutions Group. Prior to that, Tom was Senior Director at GE Healthcare with global responsibilities for revenue cycle management, analytics, and operational performance solutions. And Tom is not just a big company guy. He's also an entrepreneur. He was founder of and CEO of a company called Virus, which was a US-based healthcare software company, which was named one of the top 100 fastest growing Washington companies for 3 consecutive years to the Deloitte Fast 500 technology list. And for 14 years, Tom served in various executive management roles in hospitals and integrated delivery networks in the United States. He's published over 30 articles on a wide range of topics related to technology and software used in the healthcare space. And most recently, he's published a book entitled AI in Health, A Leader's Guide to Winning in the New Age of Intelligent Health Systems. Really exciting set of topics, a lot to talk about. Tom Lawry, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on the show.
Well, Ira, thanks so much. The only thing about that intro you're missing is the paper route I had when I was 15, but thank you for that kind introduction.
One of those two. Absolutely. No, it's a real honor and pleasure to have you. You know, typically on the show, we start out by giving our guests the floor just for a little bit to talk about Tom Lawry. If you could just take a few minutes, introduce yourself. You know, where did you grow up? How did you get interested in information technology and healthcare, and just a little bit of your journey through both sort of the entrepreneurial side of things, but also the corporate healthcare giants as well. A really interesting story.
Well, I mean, as you already went through my bio, I mean, look, I have the privilege of doing a lot of interesting things in my career and life. You know, starting out with 12 years of being in healthcare management, helping to run hospitals and hospital chains in America. That taught me a lot about the good things of healthcare and, frankly, the challenges of the things we could do better at. I mean, to me, healthcare is an exceptionally noble cause, and it's probably one of the most challenged industries when it comes to reform and getting things right at scale. So after spending a lot of years running health systems, I somehow came across, you know, the ideas and some of the very early leaders working on how to use technology to improve healthcare, which was mainly a matter of looking at how do you use technology to harness the power of the massive amounts of data that are present and growing in healthcare to do good. So with that, I left a perfectly good career running hospitals to do 8 years in the venture-backed startup world. I was not a technologist by background, but I was driven by the idea that somehow we could use this emerging technology to do better. So along the way, I've had a great opportunity to work with some of the smartest people in the world when it comes to clinical leaders and others who feel the same, that somehow, as well trained, as well experienced as so many clinicians are, the need to be able to do better, not just with individual patients, but being able to help make healthcare better at scale to benefit not just individual patients, but populations of patients. So that's been my driving factor. As you pointed out, I've had the opportunity to work for two of the best companies in the world that are big companies, GE Health and Microsoft, and here we are.
Outstanding, outstanding. You mentioned the data, and I was listening to a show you were on a little while ago where you were talking. I think it was the time when you were at GE, and you were out sort of selling diagnostic imaging and ultrasounds and MRI and all that stuff, and you sort of came to this realization that we're selling ultrasounds and MRIs, but we're also selling, as you put it, these complex data capturing devices. This isn't the first time I sort of heard this from folks in other into chemical, pharma, food. Information is this new gold, but you speak in some of your presentations about these amazing quantities, where we are nowadays in terms of the doubling of data, these odd terms like zettabytes and yottabytes, which are, astronomical amounts that's being generated constantly. Where does it all come from? You point out electronic health records, imaging, labs, clinical monitoring, proteomics. We're just deluged by it. I think we're at a very interesting point where we're at sort of a perfect storm of data where AI and these tools are really required more than ever. Can you talk a little bit about sort of why in 2020 this is indeed sort of the perfect merger, let's say, of this data that we created with these systems, and this is why you've written the book.
Well, maybe in talking about present state, let's go back just a little bit. So if you boil down what health and medicine is all about, way back to the time it crossed over from being kind of a, almost dark magic to being a scientific discipline. Ever since then, the quest has always been to get more data around which to make decisions. So think about when the stethoscope was created in the 1800s, that was all about how do I get more information? When Rankine, came across these things called X-rays and decided to apply it to the human body, same thing. It was the quest for more information. So that has always been the case. Today, what we're looking at are massive quantities of data that have the capability of doing much better, doing good in the world. But the challenge is the data is growing exponentially, and it's being put in silos historically. It's found in tens of thousands of dark pools of information scattered around the world. So when you look at the ability for us to make better use of that, that's really where AI comes in. That's where the use of the cloud as the underlying driver to bring those things together to do good. Let me throw out, since you mentioned factoids. So we have this data tsunami happening in healthcare. And when you think about AI feeds on data. So if I look at the amount of time it takes for medical knowledge to double in the world, in 1950, a newly minted physician would go their entire career in practice before medical knowledge doubled, which was about 50 years. By 2010, medical knowledge was doubling every 3.5 years. Today, 2020, the estimate is medical knowledge is doubling roughly every 73 days. So think about that. You can be the best trained clinician, physician, coming out of the best medical school, and a couple months later, the amount of knowledge has doubled. How does any human possibly keep up with that? So that's where we look at the ability to take AI, which feeds on data, is really good at certain things with data, better than humans, not everything, but better at some things. And we fuse those things together, which creates the opportunity to really not only do better at healthcare, but, you know, particularly in America, we always hear about people talking about health reform. I believe far more reform is going to happen with the proper, appropriate use of AI than will ever come out of Washington, D.C., and it's starting to happen today.
Excellent, excellent. You know, Microsoft, you know, has been very interesting in leading the industry in terms of creating this set of human-centric principles around AI, sort of the ethical creation of AI. You've created an Office of Responsible AI. You've created an ethics committee to ultimately drive this mission that you talk about AI being a force for good. And these principles, which can be found at Microsoft's website, talk about fairness, reliability, security, inclusiveness, transparency. Talk us first a little bit about what, you know, okay, we're creating an ethical framework around some sort of nebulous you know, technology. What was that like in essence? How does one go about doing that? What was the process like inside Microsoft in terms of creating something like that ultimately served as a template for anything that you do, whether it's in healthcare or in the environment or what have you, when it comes to these AI tools?
Well, boy, that's a long one to totally answer. You know, what I say in general, particularly under our CEO, Satya Nadella, you know, we are driven by not only creating great technology, but looking at how it is used in the world to do good. And, you know, to your point about AI, there's lots written, you know, just do a search on the internet about, you know, the possibilities for AI to do good, and a lot of people talking about how it can be used for evil or negative purposes against humanity. And, you know, to me, AI is neither good nor bad. It is a set of tools that in the right hands allow us to do things that are very powerful. It's how we choose to use it, what we choose to direct it towards, that really is the issue for all of us, not just Microsoft. So as we've hopefully led on the creation of some of these tools that are now commercially available for others to be doing predictive analytics and lots of AI intelligent things, with that, we believe come a set of responsibilities that everyone should pay attention to. So what I would point out is this is not the first time where technology advances have gotten well ahead of the regulators and the legislators. So there are lots of things, if we bring it back to healthcare, there are lots of things that can be done in healthcare today using AI that are legal, that are compliant with all regulatory policies such as HIPAA in America and GDPR in other parts of the world. And then the question is, they're legal, they're regulatorily compliant, but are they ethical? Are they fair? Are they doing good across the spectrum of what we want? And let me give you a quick example. So everyone listening is now newly minted clinical leaders and hospital executives. So we're running a hospital. We are looking at how to use AI to reduce adverse events. An adverse event in a hospital can be something like a hospital-acquired infection. Worse, it could be those things that sometimes seemingly come up randomly, where you're a general med surg patient, you've had a minor procedure, we're ready to discharge you, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you stop breathing, your heart stops. We code you and we put you in the ICU. So instead of going home, you're in ICU for 2 weeks, and who knows what happens after that. So we're going to use AI, predictive capabilities, all the data we have to predict which patients are at risk for an adverse event, and we're going to get out ahead of it and prevent it. So we've done this, our data scientists, our clinical leaders have done this, and in our pilot, we've reduced adverse events in our hospital by 60%. So think about that. It's a quality improvement when it comes to medical quality if I can keep you from having an adverse event. Economically, if you're discharged instead of going to ICU, I'm making better use of the funds. So quality-wise, cost-wise, 60% improvement's great, isn't it? 60% is a statistical average. If I told you that overall good of 60% meant our ability to predict and prevent adverse events in white males was 3 times better than Hispanic females, would that be okay? It's legal. We've measurably improved quality and performance. Is that okay? And I have my answer, but those are the kind of things that are coming up every day when it comes to not only making sure we're doing all the right things with securely managing your personal health information, but it's how we apply it. It's how we look at the equalities or the inequalities we will create as we're putting these things in the wild.
It's a fascinating example, and I read about it offline to this concept that even bias, even with these powerful systems, finds its way in is really, for someone that's not in the tech space. It's
well, I just actually did another webcast this morning, and the specific focus was around this. But one of the questions I often will pose to those I have the opportunity to work with is simply, so many organizations in and out of healthcare are really laser focused on diversity and inclusion programs. So kudos to anyone working on that. So it's all about this mindset that whether it's employees, whether it's how you treat your customers and patients, of making sure you're inclusive, making sure you're fair. Mm-hmm. And the question I like to pose is your AI effort in part of your diversity and inclusion program? And many times I get a very funny look when I ask that question. But when you think about, we're making great strides on diversity and inclusion with these formal programs. Now, if we're introducing or unleashing a set of technologies within the organization, serving the very same people, and we're not applying those same standards, it's just an interesting conversation, mainly to get people to recognize that AI has great social implications, and it's really up to leaders, not necessarily the programmers, but the leaders of these organizations to understand not only the power, but the responsibility of how these things are applied towards their mission, their goals, their strategies.
Absolutely. Excellent points. Tom, another thing that you talk about is sort of this hype cycle, or I think that might be the proper term. And you have in one of your presentations, you have this quote from Bill Gates, where he says, we always overestimate the change that's going to be occurring in the next 2 years, but we're underestimating the next 10 years. While it makes a lot of sense that, okay, I'm sitting here at my computer and clearly I realize that, for instance, I can't just push a button on my keyboard right now and pop out a solution to the COVID crisis. On the other hand, as you point out in your book in the section called No Swim Lanes in the Ocean, that there have been quietly very interesting AI applications going on in the pharmacy business. And that's near and dear to me because I'm a pharmacist by undergraduate training, where you talk about how pharmacies are no longer, these places where we go just to get some pills. They have these AI networks. I go in my pharmacy, I get my pills, but I can also get my vaccines and schedule a doctor's appointment, maybe get some nutritional advice. Can you, talking about sort of this erasing of boundaries and encouraging sort of non-traditional players in certain industries to do new things, to do other things that they don't normally do. Can you talk about some of the things that you're seeing in terms of sort of like these last 10 years that we've underestimated and where we are on the AI front with regard to some of those types of players?
Yeah, well, when it comes to starting with the quote from Bill, I mean, to me, the journey in AI, one, particularly in healthcare, everyone's early in the journey. And anyone who says they've got it all figured out either doesn't understand or maybe, for whatever reason, they just don't get it. To me, AI and its evolution in health is more of a distance run than a sprint. So, there are always these technology hype cycles, and certain things become, what I call the shiny object. In healthcare and AI right now, AI is the shiny object. Everyone's talking about it. People race towards it. They put together a few pilots that actually may do some good in predicting something. But in reality, it's kind of what you were talking about. AI to be pervasive and impactful really has to be thought about in a way that says, how do we change processes using AI
Mhm.
that does something in the end that we care about, that we can measure? So if I can find a way, for example, if I said, what if I could diagnose heart disease in a single heartbeat? That might sound funny, but the technology exists to be able to do that today. Um, it's more about how do we then bring that together in a whole way of changing clinical and operational workflows within healthcare organizations. Uh, the second part is, how do we take AI and use it to improve the experience patients and consumers have across all touch points, experiences, and channels.
Mhm.
And that's where you mentioned this thing of, in my book, of, there are no swim lanes in the blue ocean.
Mhm.
Blue Ocean is a great book about, disrupting traditional businesses.
Right.
And when you look at healthcare, and particularly, let's take the provider world or even the pharma world that you referenced,
Mhm.
uh, there are very rigid traditional ways that care is provided, drugs are developed, and it's been that way for decades. AI gives others the ability, without that background, to come in and disrupt the industries. So if you look at things like, hospitals and physician clinics have operated a certain way for decades, and increasingly things like retail health, and doc in a box, and these are things that are often making better use of the technology to improve the experience for the consumer, potentially drop the price point of delivering those services. And it really is what I call the emergence of intelligent health systems. So there are those who are going to be looking at, how do we use data and AI to
Mhm.
transform those traditional ways of working. And in transforming, you're disrupting your traditional workflow,
Yep.
you're changing the way people work, and the byproduct hopefully is a better experience for consumers. And I'd finish my soliloquy by saying, think about everything that you do today with things like your smartphone.
Yep.
We manage so many of our daily experiences in life with smart applications. And all of a sudden, when we need health and medical services, why should we expect anything less? So healthcare is changing. Everyone's on the journey. Some are faster on the journey than others, but it's not a sprint. It really is going to be a distance run for how we transform healthcare using things like AI and smart technology.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, Obviously, one thing that comes up a lot nowadays in terms of AI is sort of this portrayal of this competition with human intelligence. And in, obviously, this is going to vary by industry. I know a couple months ago with the head of research at the McCormick Spice Company, where they're looking by the year something like 2025 to not have any flavorists anymore, which is a really fascinating thing. They want to give it all to AI to taste things and smell things. Um, Healthcare, however, I think we can all agree is going to the AI human partnership will be in place for a little longer. There are some examples in the Microsoft information about, for instance, medical diagnostics, where AI was tested against with some pathologists, breast cancer screens, whatnot, and the pathologist did, did better than AI. But when AI helped the pathologist, they did great together. Can you talk about some of these synergies that you're seeing in terms of sort of this AI human partnership in some of these different areas where the technologies are being applied by your
Yeah.
customer?
So there are so many things around your question that are worth discussing. So
Mhm.
it's interesting if you look back over the last few years, there are several prominent clinical journals, including one that came forward with an op-ed piece that suggested from a very well-known clinician that we should think about um, whether we continue training radiologists because AI is going to supersede their skills and the need for them. And things like that are pervasive in the literature. It causes a lot of angst among those highly trained, skilled clinicians. And at least my view is anyone putting forward notions like that really don't understand the capabilities of technology, but more importantly, applied to the care process. So, when we just think for a moment about the care process, AI is going to come along and drive massive change and transformation of how we do things. And you can boil down the value prop of AI to it's going to do one of two things, particularly in healthcare. It's going to automate processes or it's going to augment the way work is done. In automating processes, anything that's highly repetitive is likely going to be automated with smart technology, which means there are certain jobs that are mainly highly repetitive tasks like registration clerks that have the ability to be automated out of existence. More importantly, the majority of people in healthcare today are what would be considered knowledge workers. So, that's where augmentation of the best of AI combined with the best of humans. And so the best of AI are things like taking massive quantities of data and being able to spot patterns that otherwise a human might not see, or the amount of time and effort it would take to see those patterns is not as good as the use of an algorithm. At the same time, when you think about the care process, it's highly engaged with things like the ability to use judgment, wisdom, knowledge and empathy, imagination and problem solving. No one has figured out how any computer can do any of those things. So it's more a matter of looking at what humans are best at in the care process and how you pair them with the machines. And I'll give you one quick example to close this part on. So, algorithms and predictive capabilities are very good at being able to create correlational values, being able to correlate two things. So, and many times people assume that if you can correlate something, there's a high correlational value you can make a decision on. So, I want to report a research study that I've done recently. I haven't published yet, but maybe you can help me with this. So, I did this study, and I found there's almost a perfect correlational value between iPhone sales and the number of people who die by falling down the stairs every year. So think about that for a second. Almost a perfect correlation. Now, if we could reduce iPhone sales, do you think we're going to save lives? Classically in the business, it's the discussion of correlation versus causation. Computers' intelligence is very good at finding correlational values. It's really up to the clinicians and the humans to apply all those other things. And it's kind of like, we always talk about artificial intelligence. I've never been asked on a show like this to talk about artificial wisdom. It doesn't exist.
As we talk about, you mentioned things like reasoning and imagination and empathy and so forth. Obviously, these will not be eliminated. These will still require humans for various different tasks. However, related to this, there's this manual that Microsoft put out a little while ago called the Future Computed, Artificial Intelligence and its Role in Society. And there's this fascinating section. I just have a little piece here that I cut out I'd like to read. It talks about skilling up for an AI-powered world, where it says, skilling up for an AI-powered world involves more than science, technology, engineering, and math, or the STEM disciplines that everyone says are the only things we need in the future. It says, as computers behave more like humans, the social sciences and humanities will become even more important. Language, art, history, ethics, philosophy, psychology. All these things teach critical philosophical and ethics-based skills that will be instrumental in the development of these new AI solutions. Talk a little bit about this, if you would, because I think so many people, as we talked earlier, think, this is the end of my job. But really, we're talking about as the next generations of these things come along and they get more human-like, we need people, beyond just the STEM skills to help craft them. Talk a little about this, if you would.
Wow, great topic. First of all, you mentioned what I think is one of our best resources, a book called The Future Computed. It really is a book that helps. It's not a cookbook to say how to do AI around ethical principles. It's more of a framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's available free to anyone. Just go out to any search engine, type in The Future Computed and Microsoft and download it. So it's a great resource.
Yep.
I think the value of that body of work is in first of all, defining a framework that really helps create, enterprise-wide programs that really do imbue principles, and they're not our principles, but rather the principles an organization believes important. Beyond that, as AI becomes more pervasive, it really is not about, say, people losing their jobs, but rethinking their work, their careers, and frankly, their lives.
Yep.
So again, back to healthcare, Accenture put together a great study that looked at the impact of AI on, clinicians. And I think this study showed that 30% of a registered nurse's work can be automated with AI. So if we just take that for a second, if we were to sit with a group of nurses today that are, practicing, just got them talking, chances are they'd spend a lot of time talking about all of the things they have to do on data entry and things that they didn't go to school for that really take them away from clinical care, caring for patients, contributes highly to things like clinician burnout. So if we have the ability to start eliminating those things and empowering clinicians to then say, what would you spend that 30% of time on? More time actually eyeball to eyeball with patients, more time doing research, more time actually getting home to be with your family for dinner or engaging in something creative. So there's that portion. And then, AI done right is going to increasingly squeeze out the things that humans don't have to do to hopefully have them pay attention to the higher value, whether it's their practice or whether there's their personal lives. And that really, to me, is that thing of AI is neither good nor bad. It's how we use it. It's how we harness its power, and then what we choose to do with it in our careers and in our personal lives.
I spend my day job in the pharmaceutical industry and biotech industry, and sort of, the typical, while big pharma used to do everything, over the years, they've gotten rid of their manufacturing and they've gotten rid of their sales, and they do very little research nowadays. And sort of the model is, we partner with the small startup biotech shops, and we are ultimately, as big pharma, a sort of a marketing arm at the end of the day. Could you talk a little bit about the role of small startup AI innovators as a partner with a company like Microsoft, and sort of how, I know you're involved in some incubator activities on sort of on the different fronts that you oversee in healthcare and some of these different divisions. How does that work with a company like Microsoft? Do you do a lot of internal work on this, or are you actively looking at the small and the reason I ask, I think I told you offline, I have a friend in the venture capital industry that told me last year she saw 183 business plans come across her desk that had something to do with AI and healthcare alone. So
that's what I said about the shiny object. Yeah, AI. Someone's trying to start a company and raise money. Boy, AI. When you look at all the research on what VCs are actually leaning into and funding. Yeah, there's a pretty good bet that I'd write a plan for AI. Well, it's interesting, having spent a number of years in the startup world, including the venture-backed, and then having spent a number of years with, again, GE Health and Microsoft, two big global companies. I really do think there's the synergy between those two worlds. So at Microsoft, our model is very clearly we create great tool solutions and platforms that then can be used to do good, and whether that's in healthcare, retail, finance. Our intelligent, secure cloud combined with our tools are the things we create. It's then shaped by companies of all sizes who then use those tools to do what they do best. So on the smaller front, we some of our coolest, most interesting things are with smaller companies who are adopting the Microsoft cloud and technologies and then applying their own unique expertise. So we see a lot of that. I personally believe that many times the best, most creative ideas for how to use technology on transformation aren't necessarily coming from the big companies, but the small, vibey companies that have really smart people, passion, and a drive. Mm-hmm. The challenge often, as you know, and anyone that's been in startup mode is, you can go a long way with the value and the importance of an idea, maybe a few patents that you control, but ultimately you get to a certain point where scale becomes the issue. And that's where the big companies really have probably the advantage. So the ability to have someone like Microsoft, where we're creating these great tools, putting them in the hands of people that are choosing to take our tools and use it to build out their creative ideas. I mean, to me, that's how innovation truly is powered. And, I can give you some examples. There's a great partner that's smaller called Javion that have done some just wicked cool things with the use of data and analytics, and some rather complex things around eigenspace. But lately, again, COVID-19, of all of the things I've seen, they produced one of the coolest applications where they use their technology and data and Microsoft's tools to create basically a COVID vulnerability mapping system where you can go out to a state, a county, down to the neighborhood and look at the vulnerability for COVID or the risk factors. What's really wicked cool about this is it's mainly not only showing you geographically where the high risk hotspots are, but it's then correlating that to social determinant data. And what's fascinating is the growing use of social determinant data to really understand problems, and then more importantly, look at predicting hotspotting to get out ahead of a problem. In this case, it's COVID, but you can use that same geo-mapping concept to look at hotspotting for any public health issue anywhere in the world. So that's something where they use our tool, they use our cloud, but it's really the smart people who have an idea that are using those tools to then push the boundaries of what can be done.
That is wicked cool. that is. And it's actually it feeds into my next question. In your book, you talk about, and this is sort of, you see so many of the big tech players now talking about moonshots, so these 10x investments and stuff in the future. But you've part of your book, it's pretty straightforward. Look, you say nix the moonshots and create a well curated case. If you're jogging 2 miles every day, don't run a marathon on the weekends. Take us into that a little bit, because I think I think we're so used to hearing about the moonshots. But a little example like what you just said, which is so critical. I mean, it has its it uses the tools, it has its place, and something you can execute on today. Talk about this this balance as you sort of help your customers deploy these tools, where you want to think you can you push the button and cure cancer, but there's a lot to happen before that you can do.
Well, as a strategic advisor, anytime I hear a leader say they want to do an AI moonshot, what comes up in my mind is the tape from Forrest Gump of "Run, Forrest, Run." seriously, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. AI is a distance run. It's not a sprint. It's a journey. And so usually when we hear people saying they want to do a moonshot, what that usually means is they are, one, excited about the possibilities of AI to solve the problems they care about. They're passionate about making healthcare or some medical procedure better. But just because you have passion and are motivated doesn't mean you're capable of doing those things. So when it comes to true transformation, and there is a difference between innovation and transformation. Transformation is making change at scale that's sustainable. And usually, when organizations truly want to get serious about AI, very few actually have the internal capability, the data science staff, the data estate created in a way that's really usable. But even if they get that together, in healthcare, true transformation involves things that are huge that leaders need to lead on, and that's things like what we said before. Value comes from automating or augmenting processes, which means it's a huge issue when it comes to looking at how are you reskilling staff, how are you replanning, who you're hiring, how you're managing them. It is things like data estates to say, I often hear people talk about data is the new currency in healthcare. My question then, when someone says that as a leader is, okay, if data is a new currency, are you managing your data the same way you're managing your finances? And it's kind of like, show me your board committee on data. Show me, you can show me where every asset and your liabilities and pro formas are, but we have to have the same discipline for data. So curating projects at scale requires a whole lot of heavy lifting before you ever apply an algorithm. And if you do, you might be able to have a pilot or two that works, but transformation at scale means you're going across the enterprise with everything from creating a new data-driven culture, having a modern data estate that allows you to, with agility, do multiple projects to apply artificial intelligence. And many times people are excited, but a lot of that heavy lifting has to be done before you can really be successful. So that's where the moonshot sounds great, but starting with a well-defined use case with curated data to have an early win and building upon that is much lower risk, much higher value than going home thinking you're going to do a moonshot. And apologies to anyone who's ever done a moonshot and actually reached the moon and not only got the person on the moon, but got them back from the moon safely.
Let's go into the future a little bit. I think it's maybe chapter 15 in the book where you start looking out. You start talking about biohacking, which is a topic that we get into the show. We talk about human enhancement quite a bit on this show, and aging, whether we're talking about biological or cybernetic, what have you. You talk about sort of the Elon Musk mind-computer connections, things like intelligence testing. Obviously, there's a whole science fiction future potential to this stuff. What is Tom Lawry most excited about in the science fiction part of this?
Oh boy, well, yeah, everyone's got opinions. I mean, we got a lot of data that says, here are the early use cases now. There are a lot of smart analytical firms like Frost & Sullivan that have done a map to say between now and 2025, here are the most likely use cases in health and medicine and life science. I mean, if we really go beyond 5 years, it's almost impossible to truly predict. I mean, it's kind of like, we know a lot about weather patterns, but predicting exactly where the tornado will land is pretty elusive. I think everything that people are talking about have possibilities. The computer brain connection, as wacky as that sounds, there are already interesting studies being done to really look at how, things like AI and brain waves might be used to help people who are who are disabled, who are amputees, who are any of a number of things. Biohacking sounds pretty scary, and yet there probably are some applications in the future that will come forward. I mean, the ones I look at that I get most excited about in the book that I call it the data whisperers, where we already have some good work. Do a shout out to a colleague of mine, Eric Horowitz, who's a physician and our chief data scientist at Microsoft, where a few years ago he got published in a very prestigious journal, where he and a couple of others basically went and mined search engine queries. He went out to a search engine and he just started looking and did some deep algorithm work around looking for patterns in what people were putting their hands on the keyboard to search for. And it wasn't looking for health things, or just anyone banging their keyboard looking for something on a search engine. They just cataloged and looked and did some deep learning. And anyway, the long story short, he was able to take the study of this data and identify a group of people with pancreatic cancer before they had a diagnosis. And that sounds kind of strange, but basically the theory is in large databases, much of which healthcare has, the data is constantly whispering things to us. We either aren't listening or we don't have the tools to understand what the data is telling us. So I look at things as strange as that sounds now and say, I think a few years from now, our ability to take AI and do more of a blanket to say, what is the data whispering to us about an individual patient, about a population of patients, that would dramatically change the way we not only think about data, but the way in which we approach things, particularly like population health. There are a lot of other things on drug development. There are some great companies like Adaptive Technologies that are trying to create a single blood test that will tell us so much about you, your history, your future risks. And a lot of these things sound pretty sci-fi, but I mean, there are smart people working on them, making good progress. So I'd say, check back with me in a couple of years and we'll see how we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tom, coming back to you, we typically ask a wrap-up question just about you, important mentors and influencers over the course of your career, folks that have guided you on this path. If it wasn't for them, Tom Lawry would be doing something else now. Anyone specific you might want to highlight, give a shout out to, that could be a professor, could be a co-worker, author?
Yeah, it's a great question. Probably the most influential for me has always been not one person, but I guess something one of my mentors taught me a long time ago, which is none of us is as smart as all of us. So, I mean, when I was in healthcare, I spent so much time with brilliant, dedicated clinicians, and whether they were top of the charts in research or whether they were just the kind of doctor that you looked up to because of their commitment. Mm-hmm. In the roles I've been in at GE and Microsoft, so much of whatever knowledge I possess comes from just the ability and privilege to parachute into organizations of all sizes around the world and just get to listen and sometimes work with super smart clinicians and others who are very dedicated to saying, man, this is a big problem. I want to find a different way to solve it. And to me, AI gives us the ability to think and act differently. And many times, so many clinicians and others, they've been classically trained, and it's almost hard for them to break out of the way they think and work because that's the way you've been trained. That's the way you've been educated. I mean, I would not want to go into surgery and have the surgeon right before they put me under say, hey, I'm feeling lucky today. I think I'm going to just freestyle. But my greatest learnings have been with smart people trying to approach a big problem, and they're willing to think differently in how they're going to approach it, which to me is the only way we're going to achieve true reform.
Wonderful, wonderful. For everybody watching on the YouTube, the ideaXme YouTube channel, or it's going to be listening on the various podcast networks. You have been listening to the amazing Tom Lawry, National Director for Artificial Intelligence in the Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft, doing really amazing things for the creation of intelligent health systems for patients, for consumers, for clinicians. Pick up a copy of his book, AI in Health, A Leader's Guide to Winning in the New Age of Intelligent Health Systems. Tom, thank you for taking the time to come on the show today and share your knowledge with us. Thank you for everything you do in the field of intelligent health systems and AI. And as we say for ideaXme, thank you for moving the whole human story and the artificial intelligence story forward. It's really been a pleasure having you today.
Ira, I really appreciate coming on. Thanks so much. This has been great.